trust yourself and don't ever think you're like stuck. I thought academia was the only way. There's like a whole world out there for us. So don't feel like you're stuck. Like I feel now, if I don't like academia, I can walk away and be completely fine.
Mhm.
But past Megan was like, oh my gosh, what will I do if I don't get a tenure track job? I'll be homeless in the street.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Grad School Sucks podcast, where we believe that your life and career after grad school should rock. I'm your host, Matt Carlson, and today I'm talking with my good friend, Dr. Megan Hicks. Megan is a tenure-track professor of social work at Wayne State University, and she studies health disparities among Black communities. She is a PI on several large grants related to her research there. In addition to her academic work, Megan also runs her data analytics business called Hicks Data Consulting, where she works with a variety of organizations and research professionals on their data-related needs. This episode will be particularly interesting for folks who want to have an academic career after grad school, particularly in the research and grant-intensive side of academia. Additionally, in this episode, Megan shares a lot of experience and wisdom from her time getting her business up and running, and I think that part of the conversation will be valuable to folks who are interested in using their grad school skills and expertise to start a small business or side hustle. Lastly, I asked Megan some bonus questions that you can hear at the very end of the episode. So if you enjoy this episode, please listen to the very end to hear those. Anyway, I'm excited to be able to share this episode with you today, so without further ado, let's get to the interview.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, Megan Hicks, Dr. Megan Hicks. Megan is the CEO and founder of Hicks Data Consulting, a data firm that works with organizations and research professionals on their data needs. She is also a tenure-track professor at Wayne State University in the School of Social Work, and she is an assistant professor and focuses on health equity among Black communities and risk-taking among youth and young adults. And disclosure, I did go to grad school with Megan. I've known her for a couple years, so it is good to talk with you, Megan. How are you doing today?
It's about 10 years
It was forever.
or like 9. Yeah.
It was so many years, and at this point, it's like someone just reminded me, I think it was Allie, that as of next year, it will be a decade since we started our PhD. And did you start in 2013?
I started in 2012, so it's
2012.
been a decade.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that is crazy. So the first question related to grad school, why did you go to grad school? What made you interested in grad school?
I graduated undergrad and I was super interested in research in undergrad. So I'm the nerd in undergrad learning SPSS and all of that. I did like research jobs. And so when I graduated, I was looking for research jobs and they're like, psych, you need all these degrees at that time. I don't think that is like that anymore. But at the time when I was looking, or at least the jobs I was looking at, it was like, you need a master's, you need a PhD. And so I'm like, I guess I'm going to get my master's. And that's how it happened. I applied to one school, UGA,
UGA?
and that's where I went.
Yep. And you did the I don't know what it's called, but like the straight through track of doing your master's and PhD kind of bundled together. Is that right?
Yeah. And I slid into that the same way. So same kind of story. I got my master's, was super passionate about research, went job searching, like during the first year, end of the first year of master's, and everything I wanted, they're like, you got to have your PhD. And UGA had the postbac program, and all you did is sign a paper and keep going. So I went straight through.
Yep. Straight through. What did you love or take away about your grad school experience at UGA?
Definitely the community, and I don't know if our experience was unique. Like when I talk about like the women friendships that I created in grad school, it almost seems kind of unique, but I hope other people are experiencing it. But I had very deep connections with people in grad school because I feel like we were all going through it together. It's like a different level of connection that you have
Yeah.
with people. Like even if I haven't seen you in a while, I feel like we're just very comfortable because we've been through that together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trauma bonding maybe, but
Yep.
yeah.
Trauma bonding, stats classes, negotiating drama between professors.
Yeah.
Not to get too dicey.
Yeah.
When did you start honing in on a research area?
I switched areas like after my master's. So I started and I was really interested in family relationships because my background has always been in like human development, or it was in sociology, but I wanted to change to human development undergrad because I was just super interested in family relationships, and they were like, just graduate with sociology. Like
Hmm.
it's not gonna change anything really, and it didn't. And but then I realized I was more interested at the end of my master's on how like relationships impact individual health. And so then I changed to health outcomes going into my PhD, and kind of it stuck at that point at the beginning. First or second year of PhD is when I really honed in on health
Hmm. Yeah.
outcomes for people, for
And
youth.
I feel like it's unique that you went into a PhD knowing you wanted to do research. What opportunities or what cool experiences did you have doing research during your PhD that you think other people might not have gotten?
I worked for the. Are we allowed to name drop to people, or should I just say I worked for a place?
You can do either way, and if you name drop and regret it, I can edit it out. Doesn't matter.
Well, I'll name drop because I think it's an amazing place. I worked for the Center for Family Research, CFR. Yeah. CFR, Center for Family Research. They do a lot of programs in the community for Black families, Black youth, Black young adults. And I was very appreciative that I had an advisor that let me do whatever I wanted because I was just very interested in from start to finish data collection, evaluation, dissemination, like all of it. And so I was able to really dive in and go out into the field, collect data, clean that data, code it, and analyze it, present it, from start to end.
Hmm. Are there any like specific research projects that you remember fondly, or were your favorite, or had cool findings?
I had an interesting experience that I thought was fun, and then I told other people, and they were like, that's kind of alarming.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a positive or a negative story, but so I worked with this specific project focused on African American men, and we went and it's hard to engage Black men in research. And so we decided to drive to, and we're collecting data in rural areas. So we decided to drive to the rural areas and set up in this hotel and just have them come to us, like if they were free. Anytime during the day, I sat in a room and had the men come to us, and we would collect data on the survey, and we collected saliva. And I guess maybe because I was talking to people that don't necessarily understand the research strategy or research data collection, but they were like, you went to a hotel and waited for men to come and meet you
Yeah.
and then left. I'm like, yeah, this kind of sounds like I was selling myself, but I wasn't.
Yeah. Sounds sketchy, but that sounds like a super effective way to get a hard to reach
Yeah.
population.
And it was actually like fun getting to meet them, and we had food. And so it was like super low pressure and just like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
just something different, to do and collect data and go see a community that we're working in. So,
Yeah. Um, and what I'm trying to say. So I was never a part of, again, disclosure for context. I was never a part of CFR. I did work on some projects that kind of like orbited or were affiliated with CFR. Um, and it always struck me as interesting that it focused on rural people of color, specifically like black families, black young men. What other, I guess, obstacles did you all see in reaching a rural population as opposed to like a more urban population where I think most of the research
Mhm.
focuses?
I think internet was a big one. So we had to, like, not everyone had internet at home. So we had to figure out a way for them to fill out the survey without internet or on their phone or going to meet them at McDonald's or the library, public places with internet. So internet was definitely one. Finding the sample too. So they had a very specific way in collecting the data that wasn't regular snowball sampling. It was a different type of sampling, but the population was very different and kind of hard to find. So they had also like community liaisons, I believe, there to also help, like reaching out to the community to in the schools to run the programs and get families involved.
Yeah, very cool. And what did you end up doing your dissertation on?
Um, Um, we have to recite the title so many times. I think it was Risk and Protective Factors Influencing Sexual Risk Behavior Among Black Young Men.
Yeah,
So I focused on a big portion of my work focused on protective factors to have a more positive outlook on risk and how being involved with positive people, having positive friends, mentors, positive things in your life can protect against, those risk behaviors.
very cool. And I assume you ended up publishing some part or all of your dissertation. Do you remember
hmm
where it ended up finding a publication home?
I can probably look it up really
Uh,
quick. I don't know. I don't know.
I know you published in a lot of places.
Yeah. I think it Yeah, I don't know if it was one publication, so it might have been one or two. I wrote a traditional dissertation, so it was one analysis, but it was a giant analysis. So I may have broken it up, or I know I published one for sure, but I don't remember where
That's interesting.
exactly.
I remember your mentor telling it was maybe in a class. He was just kind of like riffing how he would often do, and he was talking about um, I don't know how there was only one analysis for the long form dissertation, and so if it required reanalyzing, you only had to reanalyze one analysis. And he was going on about how it was actually more practical than doing the
hmm
three embedded. But
Yeah,
he's a funny guy.
he was.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean that I only did one. So people often think, oh, you did traditional, you only had to write one. But he was also about like producing results. So it's like I published at the same time as writing my dissertation.
yeah,
Like, like in parallel. You don't have to submit like three for your dissertation. I think he would rather submit one and then have two published already. So there were still like more. But
absolutely.
yeah, which I think is smart. But
And I pulled up your CV. We've got Archives of Sexual Behavior, Journal of Ethnicity and Substance Use, American Journal of Men's Health, Journal of Sex Research, Archives of Sexual Behavior. Is there any journal that you are particularly in love with or liked publishing in?
not yet. I don't know. I haven't, it's never like I haven't had a pleasant experience each time. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
always a bit
think
of
that
pain.
is a, yeah, I don't think that's ever like an exciting experience. I mean, your first one is definitely exciting and it's exciting when it's published. I don't think the process is exciting. So,
For sure. And so it looks like, graduated in 2017, and then went on to the postdoctoral to faculty transition fellowship at Wayne State University.
mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that fellowship and what it's like?
Yeah. So it was a postdoc. I have a lot of critiques of it. So I could share that as well because they really sold us a dream. So what the program was supposed to do was it was a 3-year postdoc and we would receive this NIH training and and during the first year, and then we would have to write a grant in the second and third year. And then it would set us up to transition into full-time faculty. And they kind of made it sound like we would just transition and be welcomed. But the reality was, yes, we did the NIH training, but it was kind of a mess. And then there wasn't any real guidance afterwards. And then we just had to apply like everybody. There wasn't any like special treatment or anything to help us transition into faculty. I had to do everything on my own. So that's my big critique of these programs that are geared towards students of color, postdocs of color, is that they don't always deliver. Um, and I've been working with people to help improve those experiences so it doesn't happen to other people. But um, I did transition, but I don't want it to go, all the credit to go to that program because
Yeah,
I did everything myself.
for sure. And it looks like you were pretty active in the grant space at that time.
hmm
Um,
Which I give that credit to our training at UGA,
yeah.
Like our mentors and the environment we were around was federal grant heavy. So I think, and my undergrad experience, I've been on an R1 grant ever since freshman year of college. So it was just like the environment I was in was set up for that.
hmm And how? So you transitioned. You got a tenure track job after that fellowship in.
Oh, can I make a comment about that? Because it
Go
was
for it.
it's a 3 year postdoc. I don't suggest 3 years. Like after the second year, I think 1 year is too short, 3 years was too long. And so I think I was ready in the second year. I took up teaching to make extra money. So I was teaching 2 classes and doing research, and I was basically doing service to, I was like a faculty member at the end of my second year.
hmm
So in the third year, I was just ready.
And so that's interesting because what do you think students who want to go on to have a research career in academia should be looking for in a postdoc or a postdoc fellowship?
Yeah. Definitely like places with data already.
Mm.
So my postdoc, I had mentors who had a plethora. I was searching for that data already, so you can get publications and analyze data experience on your own because you need that to, as a faculty member. And then teaching experiences. I didn't, at UGA we didn't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of teaching, and so um, I sought it out to be hired as a part-time faculty member to also teach. So I was doing a postdoc and I was part-time faculty, so I was able to teach and get extra money because we know those postdoc salaries are not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you would have told yourself back then before you started the postdoc?
Mm.
Maybe on how the postdoc is different than being a PhD student?
It's a weird place.
Yeah.
So because PhD students you're like in this weird in between where you don't want to socialize with PhD students and then you don't know how to socialize with faculty. I chose the faculty side because that's where I knew I wanted to be, but it was a weird balancing act because we're the same age.
Yeah.
And I didn't have friends. So the PhD students would always do stuff and invite me. And I'm like, I don't know. So it was this weird in between space. So
Yeah.
maybe expect that to be in the weird in between. Also, I was the first postdoc my department ever had. So they didn't know what to do with me.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you kind of have to find your way. I had to sit down and ask myself, like, what do I want out of this postdoc to get me to where I need to go? And I had great mentors and be like, all right, well, let's get you there. So it's very important to have a supportive mentor in the postdoc process that will support you.
That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about the grants? I'm looking at your CV. I don't know if it's fully up to date, but it's grants under submission. You got 2 KO1s as a PI and then an R21 as a co-PI. Are those all three still under submission?
That's a little old,
Okay.
so those weren't funded. Um, the KO1, what's the question about it? Sorry.
Um, you're on a grant right now, right?
hmm
What grant are you on right now?
I'm on a couple of grants well, one, I am a PI. Sorry, there's like three or four. The first one, I'm a PI. It's very small to do an evaluation with a nonprofit, evaluating their interventions with young Black boys.
Mm,
And then the other few kind of grew legs into its own, or like a train. So it started as an evaluation of the juvenile justice system in Wayne County. And we initiated a risk and needs assessment into the juvenile justice pro- process. And then the two other ones, I'm PI in all of them. So the next two grants are associated with that, where we're adding a dispositional matrix into the process of juvenile justice as well. And then we're evaluating that.
very
So,
cool. So grants are like, uh, my perception of getting specifically federal grants, but grants in
mhm.
general is this huge black box to a lot of students. And unless you have a mentor who's active in getting grants, you really don't
Mhm.
know like what's going on in that world or how to get there. So how
Yeah.
did you get so involved in the grant world?
Um, I think UGA set us up for that. Like being a part of huge grants, working on huge grants, you understand the importance of funding your own research and also like giving people jobs. I don't, like that's like a weird aspect I don't think people understand of like the work you do around like your grants really fund people's jobs. But that's a side story. But being in that world, there's just an importance of if you want to make a difference, you usually have to have money in a grant
Yeah.
to do that. And so they trained us that way. So entering into my faculty role at a research one, it is that way. That's the culture.
Hmm.
Like if you want to do your own research, you have to have a grant to do that or to buy your time
Yeah.
away from the university.
And so how did you get integrated into grant life at Wayne State?
My postdoc, it was a requirement, and so that's where I wrote the KO1. My first KO1 was a product of my postdoc because it was a requirement. And then after the KO1, the feedback I received on my KO1 was like, we believe your research project would prosper, but there wasn't enough training in the grant. And I was like, you know what? I feel like I don't need more training in this certain aspect. And so I'm just going to move forward and resubmit it without it being a KO1. So then I resubmitted it without the training piece into a different mechanism. The maintenance is here. Can we just
Yeah.
pretend pause?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. We're back.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Do you want me to continue talking, like
Yep.
how
Just
to
go
get
for it.
into the grant world?
Yeah.
So yeah, my postdoc required us to write a grant, and then I resubmitted it as a different grant mechanism. And then by that time, um, faculty, as soon as you start your tenure track appointment, it's really important to gain, collaborations with people. And I kind of had this reputation of like, ooh, she writes grants, ooh, she submitted to NIH. And so people are like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? And so um it just snowballed from there. And then there's always these little tiny calls that once you are good at writing grants, they're I don't want to say super easy, but easier. And so the first grant I got funded right away. It was a foundation grant and it was small, and I just felt like it was easy to write and I wrote it and got funded for that. And then the evaluation grants came from the community connections I had, and the dean of my department actually, she knew my reputation and was like, I think you really need to do this. And that was that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So how do you feel? I love that you brought up the foundation. How do you feel about um, like NIH funding versus going to like private foundations? Do you have feelings about that?
I think it's your comfort level and time management. And so starting out, it's easier, I think, to get the smaller grants to build to the new one. So that was a major feedback too of like the R21 that I wrote. Um, they wanted data. So I believe you should, go after smaller things, get data if you don't have data, publish, analyze, show results, and then build that into the bigger NIH proposals.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I was a research scientist at that research and intervention center, it was fully funded mainly by like private foundations. And that blew my mind because I had always kind of poo-pooed on the idea of going private with
Mm-hmm.
funding. But I saw how successful they were at it. And
Yeah.
it's like once you do well in that space and you can maintain those connections, you can have a long, track
Mm-hmm.
record with funders, and they'll just keep, if they like your product, they'll just keep giving you money.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what happened with the Juvenile Justice Project. That's why I said it grew legs because it funded the first time and they've funded it two times over. And so it's funded until 2025 and it started in 2020.
yeah,
So,
that's awesome. So for folks who want to get into the grant space and maybe like don't know how, or they don't have like a connection at the moment, what, like, I don't know, 2, 3, 5 things do you recommend they start doing
yeah.
today to prepare them?
Well, NIH has a lot of, I don't know if the money's involved or maybe because I'm at a university, they always come and give presentations about grant writing or full and associate professors who are in that NIH space. They're always presenting about how to write a grant, specifics. Like there is a professor in nursing who is doing like a whole series right now, like each session, like how to write specific games, how to write your research strategy, how to do letter of intent. Like it's very specific, and so they're just free things to attend for that. Um, and they love to talk about it. So that I met that person already because he shared a call and was like, "Does anybody want to be on this call?" And they do like university wide calls too if they're interdisciplinary grants. And then everyone's always just been welcoming and talk about the process. But
Yeah,
even if you don't feel comfortable, I've noticed there were people on those large calls that were like just wanted to get the experience too. So don't feel like if you're at a university right now and you see like a call for like a big grant, don't feel like intimidated. Just be like, "Can I hop on there? I have some experience in this." And they're like, they get excited about having, young people on it.
yeah, that's awesome. Um, so I feel like that kind of brings us to today. So you are tenure track assistant professor at Wayne State University. You've got grants going on, you've got publications going on, you've got teaching going on. What is the tenure track faculty life like?
Well, okay, I can only speak to, well, I guess it's kind of relevant. I started my very first semester tenure track in the pandemic. Like I literally got in the classroom for like a month or so, like or January. So I didn't teach the first semester, so fall. And then winter, we shut down in what, February, March? And so I only got a little bit of that part. So it's been interesting being a faculty member in the pandemic, but it's been overwhelming
Yeah,
um, because of that and the balancing act of service, teaching, and research is very time consuming. So it's very like you have to be really on your time management if you want to have a life.
yeah,
Also, I started in the midst of like civil unrest with, George Floyd and everybody, just there was just so much protests and the majority of the protesting was around our campus and around my apartment. And so
really? Okay.
and participating in those, it was just a lot. and the university wanted to respond, and so I was a part of those efforts, and so that was like the service component.
Mhm.
um but it's just a big giant balancing act.
Yeah. What a unique time to be there.
Mhm.
Um, so for folks who are thinking about university life, what do you recommend? To me, it seems like you have a great balance of things. We were able to meet and have this call. I know you have good family relationships and some friends that you maintain.
Mhm.
You're also, kicking ass at all the things having to do with being a professor. So what do you think helps you like maintain that balance and survive in what I see as like a super tough you know, place to be in?
Yeah, definitely having those supports and like really finding people that are really great people, you know? Like the first grant that I got, I think I'm really good at like finding good people, you know? Like I'm an empath and I can read people really well. And so I made my first work bestie and we submitted that foundation grant. And so we just have like a really good relationship and we push each other to get grants, and then around teaching too. So like there's other people that teach the same sections as me, and so I always talk with them and we like brainstorm the classes together. So it's never like doing anything completely on my own. I think that is a big thing in this profession, is that it's very isolating and you could probably do everything on your own. I just really choose not to because I know that I can't do that. Like I would be
Yeah.
miserable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so we haven't even brought it up yet, but in the midst of all of this professional development and career you've got going on, you also, excuse me, you also have a business that you run, Hicks Data Consulting.
Yeah.
So when did you start up Hicks Data Consulting?
Um Well, I started doing the work that I did that informed my business like after graduation. So when I graduated in 2017, I didn't have a job lined up because that's how academic jobs work, and I was jobless for like 6 months, and then got the job, the postdoc at Wayne State. And so I didn't have money for 6 months. And so I got on Upwork and was like freelancing, doing a lot of different research. So that's when I found out that the research skills that I've gained can translate into market research, like any type of research. Actually, translated it the most into market research because I think having a degree in human development really makes us good at like predicting human behavior and like setting up, that type of market research. And then in 2019, so I was just freelancing and things were growing and growing. And then in 2019, I was still a postdoc, needed more money, and I was doing really good at the market research and um, analyzing data on Upwork for dissertations and faculty members. And so I'm like, I think this could be a business. And I'm tired of paying Upwork. Upwork takes a large percentage of your money. And so I'm like, I'll just start my own business. And then it boomed after that.
That's awesome. And what kind of clients did you work with at the beginning, and what kind of clients do you work with today?
Yeah, so at the beginning, it was a lot of partnering with universities and students to do dissertations or any research projects that they have. Like a lot of places had like on staff statisticians, but those people were really busy. And so word of mouth spread because I had one client reach out and she was like, yes, we have an on staff statistician, but they're so busy and I have deadlines. And so my advisor said, like, I could work with you. Is that okay? And I said, yes. And then she gave my name to 17 members of her cohort.
Wow.
And I analyzed everyone's data after that. Because it was really simple stuff, t-tests, pre-post things, correlations. And so that was mainly like what I was doing at the beginning, students, and then also market research. So there are companies on Upwork that big companies like eBay and Airbnb and different companies. One big one that I'm not allowed to talk about, but it's a big one that can find you on Upwork, and so I kept those relationships too when I started my business and still did like the market research side as well. So I was doing mainly market research and then students at the beginning.
That's awesome.
And, and then I moved away from students because now that I've moved into my faculty position in 2020, time is gold. And so I'm like, I need to be able to work less and still maintain an income. And so I realized working with nonprofits and businesses, I can raise my rate and work less. And so I shifted to nonprofits and different businesses, still doing market research, but also doing a lot of program evaluation and any data need from start to end. I always say that data collection, evaluation, implementation, work with nonprofits, and so that's what I focus on now.
That's awesome. And I feel like you're unique in that you've got both the methods, like you've done and been a part of projects that started at data collection or even started at like grant proposal stage,
Mhm.
did data collection, did all the cleaning, and did the statistical analysis. And I feel like typically people have either one or the other
Yeah.
skill set. Do you have a current like client or past client organization that was like a really great experience or a really cool project that you remember?
Yeah. Well, I have three big ones now that I put my energy into. And also just a caveat. And so if your work is very close to the work you do as a faculty member, and if you ever need to represent yourself like in the faculty member role with these companies, I don't some universities require you to report your hours. Wayne State, it's like kind of a lot. It's like 10 hours a week that you can consult in your roles. And I don't do that much with these places, but you have to report it to the university as well. So I can still maintain my business and also do consulting. So that's how I do that. But if it's not related to Wayne State and it's outside of work hours, you don't have to report it. So that's just a side note. Um, but my favorite is an organization in Detroit called Detroit Phoenix Center. They work with youth in the community and they provide like so many different resources. I also volunteer on their scholarship committee. I chair the scholarship committee that they have, and they provide scholarships to students to go to college. Um, but I work with them on a lot of different projects. So, data collection, evaluation, building a curriculum. So, they have a new fellowship program, and I'm helping them build up this curriculum because that's like my content, professor type of expertise is youth programming. And so, I'm helping them
Very
do
cool.
a lot of different things.
That's awesome.
I'm just like on a constant, retainer basically with
Yeah.
them.
Hey, having those relationships for a long period of time, I feel like is the way to go.
Hmm.
Um, do uh, do you foresee doing any work with them in the future, like in like enhanced ways or like incorporating them into grants or something, or
Yeah.
is it different than that? Yeah.
We always talk about it because, since our content areas are very similar, there's always calls. We tried to write a grant before, but it was just too busy. And there's always a grant. That's another thing. If you're pushing yourself and you can't submit it, and I refuse to break myself down, there will be another call. There's always calls for grants that exist. So even if it's even better if you have one ready to go. So,
Yeah.
um, we're just waiting for the right time.
Yeah.
But they're completely open.
That's awesome. So I feel like now that we have a great picture of like where your career is and your data consulting thing, how many hours a week do you spend working? Can we get into like the pragmatics of how it all happens?
Um, yeah. I don't even know. I don't
Yeah.
track it. There's a joke that faculty member, it's like I didn't want to work a 9 to 5, so I chose academia to work 24/7. I feel like that's kind of true, but I've never tracked it because my job is so flexible. Like I feel like you choose that flexibility for your life. Like yesterday, I worked from like 12 to 8 or 12 to 9 p.m. because I had stuff to do in the morning. And then sometimes I work on Sundays. Um, just because grad school programmed me that way,
Yeah.
like we always worked on Sundays, and I'm trying to get out of that. Um, but probably, I try to work close to 40 for academia, but it never will reach that. I would probably say, I don't know,
Yeah.
over 40.
Yeah. And then how much do you think you work on the consulting gig each week?
At the very beginning, it was a lot. Like I was dedicating probably 20 hours a week, like the whole like work 9 to 5, work 5 to 9 on your own thing. So I adopted that method to get my business up and running. Um, but now I would say probably like 8 hours or 7 hours a week
Hmm.
with the consulting.
Yeah. And then going back to the professor life, what proportion do you spend on teaching versus research?
Um, there's percentages. I need to look them up. I think it's like, like 40, 30, 20 or whatever,
Mm.
where I think I don't know what a 2-2 means, what that relates into as percentages. But my appointment is a 2-2 where I teach 2 classes per semester. But since I have grant money, I bought out and I teach 1 class per year. Um,
One class per year.
1 class per year.
That's awesome.
I've been reassured that for my university, that is enough to get tenure. We'll see.
Yeah.
People have said that is enough, and it's very broad and vague in the paperwork that we have. So if you're a tenure track, professor, you have all this paperwork you have to submit every year and handbooks and things. And in the handbook, it just says to have a teaching record. And so when I ask them how much is enough, they're like, just enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome. I don't know about you. I was never a huge fan of teaching.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't like teaching.
Yeah. The research is the coolest part, in my
But
opinion.
I'm really good at it. So I think the difference too is that my teaching scores are really high. But I don't like teaching.
Yeah. Do you have grad students that you mentor?
I have my first one this year.
Oh, very cool.
It's weird to be on this side.
Yeah. I
So
bet.
I have my first one this year and going into my third year. So this is my first like official major professor role.
Hmm.
I've informally like helped students in the previous years, but they like guarded my time with that because I was chairing a committee I wasn't supposed to chair. Um, so that's why I didn't mentor
Yeah.
students.
That's awesome. So, I'm just curious. Do you know what year you plan to go up for tenure on?
I think it's 2025
Okay.
because I started in 2020. So after you go up in the fifth year, I think.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Do they have like defined like metrics that you have to hit for publications or anything?
see, this is what I was talking about. It's defined, but it's not defined. So there's not like numbers.
Yeah.
So like publications, I think they say 3 per year. That might be, I think they said like 15 total or something for 10 years. So it averages out to 3 a year. But everything else is defined but not defined.
Yeah.
And I've heard that's an issue at different universities. Um, so like I said, you have to have enough teaching, you have to have enough service, and 15 publications.
Yeah. Do you feel like the grants are gonna, I don't know, be kind of like heavily weighing on the scales? Because I feel like at the assistant level, it's not necessarily expected as much
Hmm.
as it is at the associate or full.
Yeah, so they told me that like my boss, like, whoever my boss is, the position, they told me that grants are to be viewed as icing on the cake.
Mm.
And so, and at this stage, they don't necessarily count funded grants either. They just want to make sure you're submitting grants too. So, like, I feel like at assistant level, at least at my university, it's the same weight. A
Yeah.
submission is the same weight as funded.
Interesting. Well, I feel like you're going to have a lot of icing on that cake when that day comes.
I know. Well,
Um,
they were kind of looking at it negatively too, because I didn't have as many pubs. So now I like beefed up the pubs to make sure I'm good. But I'm like, my postdoc was about grants. It wasn't about writing. So they were like, that's true. And they got over it.
Man, I feel like I would, if I was an administrator, I would, and maybe this is a bad thing, but I would value grants like
Right.
way above publications because you need publications to get grants. It's not like the other way around.
And since we've been in a pandemic, that's what they're looking for. So this is why it's frustrating to be a faculty member in the pandemic, because the universities want money and need money. And so they're like, where's the money? And I'm like, well, do you want me to write papers or do you want me to get money? Because, like, you
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, well, that is awesome. I what do you think uh back in like master's program Megan had in mind for their future career? Like, is this where you thought you'd end up?
No. Masters Megan just wanted to like work on a research team.
Mm.
And then I guess having the mentor that I had, like seeing the power that he had to make a difference and create things and get funding for his own research interests, that motivated me and be like, oh, I could create my own programs. I could help, I could have power to give agencies to or to have agency to give to others, like that just really empowers me to be able to, design my own program or help other like nonprofits like beef up what they're doing. um I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything you would have told grad student Megan to help her like prepare or navigate to this point?
um Trust yourself and don't ever think you're like stuck. Like a realization I think for me that happened last year was that I thought academia was the only way.
Mm.
And the fact that there's so many other avenues, and like even when you're in your PhD program, I feel like people get shunned if they don't want to be in academia. But there's like a whole world out there for us. So don't feel like you're stuck. Like I feel now, if I don't like academia, I can walk away and be completely fine.
Mm.
But past Megan was like, oh my gosh, what will I do if I don't get a tenure track job? I'll be homeless in the street.
Yeah. Yeah, and uh, I I love the fact that you have the Hicks data consulting, and I remember when you started like the branding and you got like the new website and everything. What? I'm sure there are tons of grad students who want to start some kind of
Hmm.
business or side hustle based on what they've learned in their PhD program.
Yeah.
What do you think they can do, or what should they know about doing that that could prepare them to actually like make it into something like you have?
Um, I would just make sure to set aside time to learn. Like I went into full, we're researchers. I went into full research mode on how to create a business, how to create a business plan, what's my mission, what's my purpose, just having a clear message and a clear plan for what you want to do before launching
Mm.
um officially. I think, I wanted to prepare myself fully, like researching everything before I was like, boom, you know, Hicks Data Consulting. Because I've
Yeah.
met some people that kind of like started their business and they didn't think through that whole process first. And so they're like jumbling um,
Yeah.
on their purpose and what they want to do.
Is there anything you would have done differently based on what you know now?
Um, I branded myself when I first started because I had so many student clients. I like branded myself for students, and then I had to rebrand kind of. But I don't know if that was just like an evolution or I wish I would have did it different. I don't know because it kind
Yeah.
of was an evolution, but I don't know. I wish I started what I'm doing now earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. So we're nearing the end, and I'm trying to draw out any wisdom or any takeaways that you've got. So you're living, the tenure track life, the high speed, high pressure thing that we many of us think about when we're grad students. Is there anything that you would want current grad students to know about the tenure track life, particularly the research intensive part, to just give them like insight into what it's like or tips on how to get there or anything like that?
I think just talk to people about it. I was so scared and I thought the information would just be on the internet for some reason and it's not.
Hmm.
So like just the little things like budgeting or the submission process or definitely submission process through a university because someone else does that and um there's just other stuff that you have to do that I had no idea that I had to do. And so just to everyone you can, like where you are about the research process, the grant submission process, everything. I don't know. Everything. I don't know like how to say that better,
Yeah,
but you basically learn by other people doing it because no one is teaching us everything.
yeah,
So it's literally like asking another faculty member, like, did you learn how to do this? And they're like, I taught myself, but I can help you.
that's awesome. Yeah, relationships and networking are so, it seems so integral to getting ahead.
It is. It's very vital.
Yeah. So this is something that we talked a little bit before we started recording, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on it. So as a woman of color who's kind of climbed in this research world to the position of power you have now, you're getting grants, you have this side business. Um, what what do you see looking back now that you think other people of color or women of color should know about, gaining power and making a career in what's probably like a white dominated or a white
Mhm.
male dominated field?
Yeah. Um, I think just really listening to yourself and not having, second guessing yourself and your abilities. Like I think we kind of dim our light in that way of not being sure of ourselves in certain environments or sure how to say things correctly or who to contact and things like that. But just like really try to reassure yourself that you're supposed to be here, you deserve to be here, you like you know yourself best, you know your expert area the best for you, and
Hmm.
so because I had an experience where a white man told me like don't do that and I was not going to and I did and it turned out amazing because I listened to myself and I always think like if I listened to him it wouldn't have went that way and so I always remember that moment because that was the very first time I listened to myself
Mm.
and um yeah, and rely on others. So like if you can find a community of people of color or that you can relate to in your area, it's very like beneficial to find your community and have an outlet to talk about issues with and process through to get you through the hard times or talk about anything that would be helpful.
Yeah. Um, I've got another kind of related question, and I don't remember if it was Shaquinta or someone else who mentioned it, but someone told me that as a person of color who studies like their own population or their own demographic, there's some like stigma or a lot of questioning from people outside that racial group in terms of like is this research bias, or should you really be the one to do this? Which I thought was really, really strange. But have you ever had any kind of like interaction about being a black woman and also studying a black population?
Um, no. I've had moments where like this was an undergrad that really like stuck out to me, where I thought just because I was a black woman that and I was working with black moms that they would just open up and tell me everything.
Mm,
And they didn't, because I was associated with the university, and they're like, "Oh, like we didn't connect in that way. I also wasn't a mom."
mm,
And so it just that experience really just, taught me to check my own biases and think about, intersectionality and things like that. But I've never had any other
that's cool.
experience with that. I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
I don't
interesting.
remember who told it to me, but it was something about the effect of, and I think it was like a attitude from like decades ago of like, if you're studying your own people group, maybe you don't have like the right lack of a bias. I don't remember
Hmm.
who said that, but I
Yeah.
thought it was the strangest thing. But
Yeah. Whenever I do research, I tell everybody this, but even, my own self and people of color, working with people of color, to just have a check in with yourself. I think that's just like good research ethics, is to check in with yourself and check the biases and kind of ground yourself before you work with other people to, make sure that you're approaching it in the best way
mm,
possible. Um, but yeah,
it's awesome.
I don't know.
Well, Megan, it has been great to catch up with you. Uh, I love to hear about what you're up to. I see updates sometimes on Instagram. You DM every now and then.
Yeah. I
Any
love
any
your page.
Oh, thank you. It'll soon become mostly podcast stuff,
Okay.
to be honest. But um, do you have any parting thoughts or any takeaways that you would want current grad students to have in terms of like envisioning their future career or starting their own business or getting to where they want to be professionally?
um, just tap into your networks, learn as much as you can, keep your options open, and be open to the world. Like, don't feel like, you're stuck, and don't feel like you're not a prize, especially people of color in these different areas. Like, um, I feel like I'm a prize, and people, like if I leave, I feel like I'm a prize, because if I leave, it's like detrimental
Yeah,
to the process. And so you just remember that. Have people remember that too. I don't
yeah,
know.
it's awesome. I before we go, I had a funny story that I wanted to throw out there.
Uh-oh. Okay.
I don't know if you'll remember this, but I think we were in stats. Maybe it was stats 1 or stats 2. I don't remember exactly, and I think it was early in the semester when the class had started, and someone pointed out that I had a white hair patch. Like, I think it's right here. I don't know if it'll show up on camera. Just like a very small patch of white hair, and they were asking me like how I got it, which is like the weirdest question.
Right.
And I responded and I said, it turned white after I came down from Mount Sinai. And you were the only one that laughed. Which, to folks who didn't grow up in church, that's a reference to Moses, and he came down with the Ten Commandments, and his hair was all white or something. It was the corniest ass joke.
I love jokes like that. My humor is like that.
Yeah. As soon as I heard you laughing, I was like, we are gonna be friends.
I feel like that happened multiple times. Like, you would make comments or in presentations, and like I would be smiling because I think you're trying to be humorous, and
Right.
like no one is getting it. And I'm like, yo, he is not being serious right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the subtle humor escapes too many people, especially academics.
My favorite memories from stats, just to add some, like, I remember I forget one class with Wicks, and no one knew what was going on. And he's just like, all right, moving on. And everyone's just like looking at themselves like, all right,
Yeah.
guess, okay.
Yeah, I remember he'd be at the board with the beat of knots and
Right.
like all of his other catchphrases, and I'd be looking around to see who was actually like tracking and who else was like, I don't know what's going on.
And he turned around, he's like, good, good. And he
Right.
like just keep going. And we're just like, okay,
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
it was so funny. Yeah, I honestly thought that maybe stats would not be my strong suit in that class because I could never write I don't even know what like a regression equation looks like now. Could never tell you. And he was doing like all the complicated stuff.
Yeah. It clicked. I tell people like it clicked the next class. Like the first class always clicked in the second class. And so
Oh, that makes sense.
like backwards. So it's weird how my brain worked in that way. But it took time, I guess. I don't know.
Very fun.
But yeah.
All right, so if listeners want to connect with you in some way, whether it's about your work at Wayne State or your consulting business, how would you recommend they get in contact with you?
Well, I have a very, hicksdataconsulting.com. There's like a contact there, like a contact sheet. And then the email is just info@hicksdataconsulting.com. Hicks Data Consulting is also on Instagram. And if you want my Wayne State stuff, you can Google, Wayne State School of Social Work, Megan Hicks, or my email. It's like a generic email, but gm5019@wayne.edu. But
I was looking at that on your CV and I was like, damn, is that her real email?
Yes. I tried to order a textbook recently and they're like, you're a robot. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Give me my book.
That's so funny. All right, Megan. Well, I love chatting with you. I'm glad we've stayed in contact. And
Yeah.
thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
I would love to have you back in the future.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Folks, thank you for listening to the Grad School Sucks podcast, where we believe that your life and career after grad school should rock. I loved getting to catch up with Megan and hearing about how her career in academia is going, as well as learning a little bit more about her data business. I hope you gleaned a lot of wisdom and inspiration from her story today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and write a review. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to this podcast, consider sending them today's episode and let them know why they should check it out. And hey, if you're just hearing this episode and not seeing it, I recommend you check us out on YouTube, where we post video versions of all of our podcasts. As always, I'm your host, Matt Carlson, and I look forward to bringing you another great episode next week. Stay classy, grad students.
Megan, what is your spirit animal?
Probably like a sloth or something.
Sloth?
Or what sleeps a lot? Whatever sleeps a lot.
Whatever sleeps a lot.
A bear in hibernation.
I feel that. Bear in winter. Okay. What is your superpower?
I like to think of it as like being relatable, I guess. People really like flock to me and connect with me really easily because I think I'm really relatable and people open up.
Yeah, for sure. Last one. If you could retire anywhere in the world, where would you retire?
Probably somewhere I haven't found yet that's like extremely remote and like not even able to be found easily. I liked Belize. From somewhere I've visited already, it was Belize because it seemed that way, like less touched.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool.